Welcome to another show of Celebrate Life. My name is Gary Carolis, and I am your host. The focus of this program, as many of you know, is to show the amazing lives that people live and are living. The key word here is live. Everyone has a story to tell. All stories are worth celebrating. Over the years, I've read too many obituaries that left me pondering, I wish I could have met this person while they were alive. The intent of this program is to celebrate the lives of everyday Vermonters who are very much alive and well. If you would like to be a guest on this show or know someone who you think would be a guest, and everyone is really appropriate for this show, please contact me at celebratelife0747@gmail.com. Now I'd like to introduce you to our guest today, Tom Fleury. Hi, Tom. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm honored. I imagine whom you've had as guests in the past, and I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, like I can't really walk in their shoes, but I guess we all do what we can.
We walk in our own shoes. That's right. And we're really honored to have you here today.
Well, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
So we're here to celebrate your life. So where would you like to start?
Well, I grew up in Burlington many years ago, and just about 65, and I really celebrate where the city has come and continues to go in its future. And one of the things that I wear very proudly is my native Burlingtonian badge. But I always tell people, I'm quick to say I'm a native, but I'm not a nativist, because I really feel a lot of the positive things that have occurred in Burlington have occurred because people have chosen to move here and celebrate Burlington, and they see some of the things that such as maybe the sunsets and the view of the lake that we take for granted as locals and stuff. And so when they say, don't build that there, or don't do that, it comes from a perspective of loving what they've chosen to move to and celebrate. And they teach a lot of us locals a lot. And I think Burlington continues, yes, we have our struggles like every city does, but I think overall we continue to get better and better because of the people who live here and then also choose to come here.
That's well said and much appreciated, I'm sure, for folks. What part of town were you born and raised in?
I grew up in the new North End. I kind of hate to say that because it sounds like, and the new North End has changed demographically many times over in the last 60, 65 years. But, the old North End and the new North End, we're kind of used to kind of compare each other. And I think, we're all one community. So I say North End rather than new North End for the most part. But I've lived there. My parents both grew up in the old North End section of Burlington and had very fond memories of that being a really tight community. And I think in a lot of ways it still is in many ways. It's changed, but I think there's a lot of energy that still exists there that had existed there at their.
So they grew up in the old North End, and then here was this kind of brand new area, North Burlington, so to speak.
Yes. That
was building homes after World War II quite a bit, and they moved up to that part of town.
That's right. They were looking for where they were building, and at that point in time, it seemed like the north end of Burlington was just pushing out further north to Colchester, and they liked the old North End. They felt like they wanted a little more land and a little ranch house, like a lot of people were looking for. So they bought one for the whopping sum of $15,000 in 1960. It was a little outside of their price range, but they said, we really like the house and whatever. And now I say, I think, Ma, you got your money's worth. I lost my father several years ago, but I still have my mom. And I think now that many homes in our neighborhood, and again, they're simple ranch homes for the most part. Start with a 4 in front of them, with That's 6 digits. So it's like I think you got your money's worth.
What was life like for you as a little boy?
It was, when I look back on it, I realize how lucky I was, and I didn't even know how lucky I was when I was a kid. When I think of I went to a local private school, Mater Christi, and we got on a bus and we went there and came home, and I had a very good education there, and the education and the public school system that I came to work in for 36 years was wonderful too. And the issues that kids deal with now weren't even on the screen at the time when I was a kid, about personal safety and caring for one's physical and mental health. We took a lot for granted. I grew up in a very middle-class family, and all of our needs were met. Our home was a happy home. And so when I began to see, when I became a teacher and I began to see other students, struggle economically or emotionally, I thought, wow, how honored and privileged and lucky I was that a lot of the issues that they cope with on a daily basis, I did not need to cope with.
Right.
And I hope that gave me some empathy toward other people's situations, because I felt so very fortunately raised in a very loving and caring environment where our basic needs were always met.
Yep. You had a nice foundation
Yes.
to grow up, a very fertile ground. Yep. Oh, that's good. Any brothers or sisters?
Yes, I was born in your typical 1960s family of 4 kids, pretty close in a row, 2 sisters and a brother, and they all have chosen to move out of state. I hope it wasn't due to me, because of me, but they have chosen to relocate elsewhere, and I just chose to stay. I don't think it was necessarily a conscious decision. I always could have moved and taken up a career elsewhere, but I just kind of decided that Burlington was a nice place to live, and all of the people who were choosing to live here made a good choice, so I wouldn't want to cash that in for myself either.
Right. What did your folks do for work, Tom?
My father worked as an archivist at a local bank, and my mother was a secretary. She didn't work outside the home while we were all little kids. She stayed home, and now I think about how fortunate we were that we could get by on one income.
Yeah.
And now with the way things are, that people need 2 or 3 incomes just to have their basic needs met. So
Right.
I see that as our wages and salaries not really keeping pace with what people need to earn, because we live very comfortably on one salary, but she felt like she wanted to go back to work when my youngest brother was in school, and she did.
Oh, what's some of your fondest memories of childhood?
I think that with the fact that we lived relatively near North Beach, going down to North Beach, and what was an exciting one. We took some family vacations, because the one issue we had with Vermont was it didn't have an ocean, and it was probably good because that many more million people would live here, right? But we would often take summer vacations to go to the ocean, and I've always been drawn to the water, so I still will take some walks down to the lake and take trips, if I can, to some other bodies of water. I always joke with people that in a previous life I was a fish, but because I just feel like I like to be in the water or on the water or whatever. But so a lot of that was visiting the lake or family vacations and all.
Nice, very nice. Did you have childhood fantasies of what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Yeah, I pretty much always wanted to be a teacher, and my younger brother was 7 years younger than I, and so he was forced to be in my classroom, quote unquote, so I would help him learn his letters and alphabet, and he was my student,
Your
not by
first
choice
student.
on his part. Yeah, that's right. So I would have a little school, and I would teach him, and now he has earned a PhD, so I thought, well, my little school had one student, 100% of our students had PhDs. That's right. So I think he turned out well, probably in spite of me rather than because of me, but I always felt like I wanted to be a teacher, and then later on I went into school administration.
Yes, you did. So you went to, what elementary school did you go to?
I went to Monte Cristi, and then
that's right,
switched
Monte
over
Cristi.
to Lyman Hunt, and then Burlington High.
Okay.
And I have the fondest memories for all of the schools, very different in many ways, but I am a particularly big fan of Burlington High School because, while there are great small high schools around, and that's probably would be considered a small high school by out-of-state standards, but for Vermont it's big. I got a great education there, and I have only the fondest of memories from Burlington High. So when I drive by and now see the new high school being constructed, I feel very happy about that. I felt a little sad about the old school being torn down, but it needed to make way for the new, and I just know that the new one will help students have the kind of fond memories that I did of the old buildings.
Yes, absolutely.
It really wasn't the building as much as the spirit, and Burlington is fortunate to have a number, and many areas too, a number of great educators, past, present, and future. So
absolutely.
I was honored to be able to be in their classrooms and gain a little bit of their wisdom. Probably not as much as I should have, but we have some wonderful, wonderful teachers in the Burlington system.
So, so it seems like your school years only enhanced your desire to become a teacher.
That's correct.
Yeah, that's and then you went to college, UVM. Local?
UVM,
Yeah,
that's right.
Okay.
Yep, yep.
And to be a teacher.
Yes, and in fact, one of the programs in high school, my senior year in high school, I kind of got all my credits, like many a senior will do, and it was kind of like, well, I still will have some time in my own school day, so I went, walked from my house to C.P. Smith School as a high school senior and worked as a kind of teacher's assistant in a classroom, and again, that was kind of it was called Aspire for people who aspire to certain professions.
Right.
And I was in that program, and as I aspired to become a teacher, and that reinforced my interest in doing it. And so as a high school senior, I gave up my afternoons. Let's say, or was it I can't remember. It was a half day, but I think I gave up my mornings. That's what it was, because all of the classes I needed to take I had already taken, and so I'd work at C.P. Smith in the morning, and then I would walk to the Burlington High School for my few remaining classes for the afternoon, and I did that my senior year, and then went on to the University of Vermont in the College of Education.
Interesting. So this teaching thing has I'm intrigued because you wanted to be a teacher from early in your life.
Yeah.
Or did you have a family history of teaching that you were somehow following, or was this, you just broke out on your own and this is what I want to do with my life?
Yes, pretty much. There wasn't a family history. We did live next door to an elderly woman who was a retired teacher, and she encouraged me to pursue that, and so I knew her in her post-teaching career, but I could just see what a marvelous teacher she was, and continued to be, the connections that she made to people. So she reinforced that in me, and so I kind of followed in her footsteps.
Those mentors are critical, aren't they?
Yeah, they sure are. And I often would joke that it was later on, many years later, that I went back to be principal of C.P. Smith after having been a teacher assistant in high school there like 30 or 40 years earlier than that, I guess. Yeah.
So, all right, so you got your degree, you went into teaching. Where was your first job?
I got a job first of all as a para-educator at Champlain Elementary School, and then at Burlington High School, and stuff. And that was a good experience for me because, I think as much as there are really good undergraduate programs at our local colleges and universities, it's like driving a car. You do your best learning once you get your license, and
Right.
And so as a para-educator, I learned an awful lot about teaching in a classroom that I didn't necessarily learn, in academia, and but I got a lot of hands-on experience. And then I actually got a job working at a local Catholic school, and taught there for several years. And the pay was low, but there was a lot of great students and a lot of great teachers, lay people, and some of the sisters. And we lay people would joke in the teachers' room that the sisters took the vow of poverty and we practiced it because the salaries were pretty low. But it was a warm, caring environment. And then later on, I actually got into school administration as an assistant principal in Virgins, Vermont. And, and enjoyed that. In between that, I actually had I went back to grad school and did a stint, one term by choice in the state legislature.
Did you really?
Yeah. And I worked with, the wonderful Sandy Baird, whom we were speaking of earlier, whom we lost this past week. And she was just utterly as amazing and incredible as everybody says she was. And so I mourn her loss, but she and a lot of other people were much better legislators than I. And so, but I felt like that wasn't really my home, and that I really wanted to get back into education, so I did one term by choice. Who knows what the future will be? There's still some bright people coming along that are far better legislators than I, so I may not get back there again, and it would be fine with me if I did not. But I went into working as assistant principal at the local school in Virgins and loved it very, very much.
Wow. Your career was a blur to me a little bit here. Did you actually teach in Burlington, in the Burlington public school system?
I did not. I was a school administrator, but I did not actually teach her.
You were the principal at CP Smith?
CP Smith, and then I was assistant principal at Edmonds Elementary for a year after that, and then I went to become principal. I followed Jeannie Collins, who was our superintendent in Burlington. I followed her down to the Brandon area and worked at principal of co-principal of 3 small schools in Leicester, Whiting, and Sudbury, Vermont, and which was very different, but very educational. I always felt like I learned far more than I was probably able to help other people in their learning.
What are some of the high points of your career as a school administrator and teacher? What do you have anything? And what subject matter when you were actually teaching? Were you like a elementary school teacher? Were you okay?
Yeah, I taught all subjects. I'm surprised they let me teach music, but because of the way I sang. But as a classroom teacher, you're pretty much teaching all. So I did that in grades 3 and 5, and enjoyed it. Call me crazy, but I liked working with adolescent students the most. So 5th grade was just starting to be where my interests were. And when I was assistant principal or principal at some area K through 8 schools, I really enjoyed, as much as I enjoyed my work with the younger students, I really loved the connections you can build and the conversations you can have with middle school students. So previous to coming back to CP Smith, I was associate principal in Williston at the Williston Community School and Williston Central School, and then also Heinsberg Community Schools.
Wow.
So I got some good hands-on experience there as well.
Boy. Yeah.
36 years from
36
start to finish.
years.
Yeah.
And so
Feels
what
like
are,
10. But
what are some of the highlights? Some of the things that you just think fondly about that you accomplished, or awards you got, or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, I learned, again, as I learned far more than probably anyone ever learned from me. But what I learned from people and through my work was, meeting people right where they're at. When I would see students struggling in school and struggling with their behavior, I didn't see it so much as, I learned to not see it as acting up, but just kind of acting out, whatever stresses they might have had at home.
A little flag for people to
yeah.
think about for that child.
Yeah, and I had to remind myself and others sometimes that, when a child was, acting out in a classroom setting and not doing math and, maybe, presenting as disrupting to the class environment, I will have to realize, they probably woke up with not enough to eat and maybe not enough heat in their home, and maybe there were some family disputes before they even got to school. And I would remind people, and they're 6 years old or they're 8 years old. So, they're coping with mental health issues that we as adults struggle with and need support, and they're that much younger. And
without those coping skills at that point in their life,
So I felt like during COVID, we were starting to make some right decisions about how to reach people and support them and provide, mental health counselors in schools and, take care of people's emotional needs as well as their academic needs. And then it feels like we've pulled back a lot of those resources in the last few years. That maybe COVID taught us how to do things, and we learned the lesson, but only temporarily.
Well, that's sad.
Yeah.
Jeez. Did you, being an administrator, did you help support a lot of other teachers
Yes.
I would think so.
Yeah. And I think one of the things about working in, I've worked in small schools and large schools, but the diversity of the teachers themselves, was a benefit to the students. That students got to work with all types of teachers from all backgrounds. I'm still hoping that school districts still adhere to goals of trying to make sure that their workforces and their teaching staffs are as diverse as possible, because so many students benefit from, teachers from different cultures, teachers of different colors, teachers with different perspectives. How fortunate students are to have have a range of role models, a lot of different role models, helping them with their education and supporting their education.
When you were hiring teachers, would you go out of your way to make sure there was a diverse faculty that you?
I strive to, and again, it's really all about increasing the applicant pool, because we couldn't really hire anybody who wasn't in the pool, but districts need to continue to widen that pool for a diverse pool of applicants in so many different ways, and it's challenging because Burlington might not necessarily be first choice on people's minds in order to come here and teach, but we really have to do some active recruitment to and continue to do that. I know many districts are doing that, but to continue to do that so that we have the kind of teaching staff and the workforce that the students need and deserve.
Right, right.
Not only the students who are of color themselves that need to see adults in teaching roles or roles of authority and administrative roles, but also for other students to see people of a range of backgrounds in those roles too.
Exactly.
It always made me sad that at one of the schools I was at, the one man of color in the building was a custodian, and that I would have loved to have had an elementary teacher who was a male of color, and we didn't have any applicants at that point in time, but how beneficial that would have been for all students to see that.
So you were trying to create a diverse faculty so that the kids got the richest experience they could possibly get. What a gift! What a great gift that you were trying to do for the kids of that, and what a great gift you have been to education in Vermont. My goodness, Tom.
I don't know. We always do our best with what we have when we have it, right?
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot of people out there who are striving to do their best and are probably even dealing with fewer resources than I was fortunate to have during my career. It seems like that we have such an awareness of the needs of students and staff members as well, and yet it seems like we've pulled back the resources in order to reach out to people. So it feels like it's a very frustrating and challenging time for those who are still in the profession to do their work.
Was the Board of Education something that you saw get in the way of good education at times, or did you see it as enhancing your work as an administrator? How did that fall into things?
They generally were aiming to enhance it. Again, they have to, and I was on the Winooski School Board when I lived in Winooski for a period of time. I was on the Burlington School Board for a number of years as well. And school boards generally try to do what they can. They always have to have their ear to the ground to listen to what the taxpayers are telling them and what they can support. But it's a very common thing for a board to have their hearts in the right place, but the resources are smaller or less than even they would want to do. So I never really ran into many issues with school boards trying to make the sale with them about what we needed to do. It was more about trying to accomplish all that we needed to do with the resources we knew that the taxpayers would vote for us.
Okay. Your life has been more than just teaching, and you touched on a few things. Legislator for one term, school boards. Talk about that other side of your life outside of teaching, because I know it's quite rich.
Yeah. Well, one of the things when I was principal at C.P. Smith, I noticed was, and again, why I like to say North End versus New North End is because I think that the New North End implies that it's a wealthier community than it really is. But there's a lot of economic needs in the north end of the city that maybe a lot of people might initially not realize. And I noticed that there was a lot of food insecurity among students. They'd leave on the weekend, and I would always wonder about how much food was at home for them during the weekend. So I took an old library cart that we had, and I talked with the Oddfellows organization that was, a fraternal organization that had a building right on the avenue, North Avenue. And I said, if I take that cart and I brought it to your place, could we set up some food on that cart and pass it out on Saturday mornings? And they're, oh, sure, that's fine. And it was kind of a fraternal organization that was so common to many others that they were had a diminished membership. A lot of people who did participate in their programs were senior citizens, and they were becoming fewer and fewer in number as the years went by. So they were kind of looking for somebody to come along and help them, fulfill their mission of doing outreach to people. And so they were more than supportive of me taking that old cart and loading it up with food for 1 hour every Saturday morning. That's just about 12 years ago at this time, because it was March of 2013 we started. word got out. We had I think 3 people show up that first Saturday, 12 years ago, and then more people came, and then people said, "Well, I have some food. Could I bring it by?" And then organizations donated a few dollars, and I put that money to keep it separate from my own in my right pocket. I put my own money in my left pocket, so I wouldn't accidentally spend a donation. But it was that kind of primitive, start, and it just kind of took off. And then the 1 hour on Saturday mornings became 2, and then Hannaford's, our local Hannaford store has been more than generous in helping us with food that can no longer be sold, but it's certainly still edible and fresh. And and my rule was always I would never pass out any fresh food that I wouldn't eat myself. And that's a pretty low bar, but they always donated very good food to us, and we've been grateful to get a few 100 pounds of it every Saturday and also every Sunday for the 12 years. So we picked up a few volunteers along the way, and expanded it from 1 hour on Saturdays to 2, and then 1 hour on Sundays in addition to that, and then 2 on Sundays. And then somebody came by and said, I've got some clothes here. Could we drop the clothes? And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. There's an empty table over there. Why don't you just put them over there? And then people came in to donate food and said, oh, you take clothes too? I was like, yeah, I guess we do. Sure. And then people would be grateful because we never charged for clothes. And to provide your family with enough food and certainly enough clothes certainly takes a lot more resources than many people have. So anyway, long story short, I went from being kind of the captain of a minor league team, and then now we have a board of directors and are receiving lots of financial donations, lots of clothes donations that we have people come in during the week and set up like a little boutique, and the fresh food is set up like a little market, because I always felt like, when people show up at a food pantry, they might, feel like, that their dignity is not respected, and it's, kind of a perfunctory kind of an operation. So we want to make it look as nice as possible. So we have people that come in and, set up the clothes, set up the food. We have canned goods downstairs with the clothing, and then fresh food upstairs at the Oddfellows Lodge. And the Oddfellows and Rebecca's have been wonderfully supportive in allowing their facility to be used for free every week for the last 12 years. And so I said, I've gone from, the captain of a minor league team to we've hit the major leagues now with a board of directors, and we're officially a 501c3 nonprofit. So we have access to grants and, whatever. So it's grown into a pretty big operation, but it's only as big as what people are able to donate. And the people across the city have been very generous in their financial donations.
That's amazing.
Before, during, and after COVID. We had a few different people that pulled up in their car and rolled down their windows and said, Tommy, come here. And they would hand me like their signed over stimulus checks. And they said, I don't need this. You take it. So it was like, great, thank you. Goes in my right pocket, not the left. And so, we were able to, broaden our support to people based on what donations we got. And I never cease to be amazed by the generosity of people of all income levels and sharing with the members of our community. It's very affirming.
So every Saturday and Sunday?
Every Saturday and Sunday.
What are the hours?
9 to 11 a.m.
9 to 11. And people can come in, get food, get some clothing if need be. And do they hang out there a little bit, or is it?
Yes. Actually, again, because we have more volunteers, we're able to, kind of open up the place. The fresh food goes really fast. So I urge people, if you're going to come right about 8:45. We have a little lottery system of numbers that, so you don't have to come at 6 o'clock in the morning and get a good spot in line.
Right.
But we now have the doors open because it's cold to stand there. And, and it's, doesn't always respect people's dignity to have them waiting out in a line, So we say, come on in and sit down. And, there is a limited amount of coffee available, but if people want a cup of coffee, and we can give it to them. But at least they have a warm place to sit inside until we start at 9. And then again, we have people upstairs and people downstairs to serve people, our visitors, and people are able to go to both floors if they want to get their fresh food first. Get it, and then come downstairs for the clothes and the canned goods, and there we go. And then you can come back on Sunday. And we've never ever asked people, what their income level is or what their name is or whatever. We do see a lot of working families who struggle to make ends meet. So, it's you don't have to be destitute. If you are destitute, please do come for sure. And there are other agencies I know that we can connect you with. But there's a lot of working families who own their own homes, who drive their own cars, that are just not earning enough money.
right. Yeah.
And so they need, and they might have high medical expenses, they might have high tuition. We have, a number of families who are new Americans, and they need to get, go back overseas and visit their family every couple of years.
Right.
And that, you don't do that very
expensive.
cheaply. It's very expensive. So, people do need to save their money for legitimate purposes. So we don't ask income levels because it feels like that's a very judgmental thing, that there's people who have need at all income levels. So we just say, come take what you need, and same with the clothes. And
Wow.
we don't ask names. If you want to offer your name, fine, but we're not there to
Wow.
keep book on anybody.
Right,
we're just there
right.
to make sure that the resources that get donated to us get passed out, on a needs basis.
Wow. This started with you being a school administrator, worrying about the kids during the weekend,
Yep.
food insecurity, little cart,
Yeah.
Odd Fellows, and boom, here you are 12 years later.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
it's unfortunately a booming effort on your part.
Yeah.
Thank goodness, too.
Yeah, our need had gone up a lot during COVID, but so did our donations. And I thought, it's not ours to have like a big bank account. So if we get donations of people's stimulus checks, we'd go over to the Hannafords and buy grocery cards to distribute to people. We no longer are able to do that now. But back when we had to safe distance people in a small building, we would bring our
Right.
operation outside and just say, here you go,
Yeah.
because we didn't want to undermine anybody's health by bringing them inside a small little building. And our Oddfellows Lodge is small, so we want to not compromise people's health. So we stood outside and said, there's a grocery cart and whatever. And we did that while the donations reached that level. But and we'd have sometimes well over 100 people on a Saturday. Now we have about maybe 70, 75 on Saturday and about 50 on Sunday.
Wow.
So every weekend we still are able to serve about 125 visitors.
That's fantastic. Good for you. Wow. So there's more, though. You've done more than even that beyond your teaching. I know you've been involved in the ward clerk.
Yes.
Talk about that part of you.
Yeah, I enjoy that so much. I had served first as inspector of election in the election that Bernie won in 1981.
You were the inspector of elections.
I got elected that year, and I remember standing there with the old machines and hearing the vote totals. And
Jim Rader was the city clerk.
actually, it was Frank Wagner.
Still Frank Wagner.
That
Okay, yeah.
little piece of
That's
time.
right.
and
That's
then-
right.
Yeah, and then Jim Rader took over after Bernie was elected.
That's
and
right.
yeah, I do remember a little bit of Frank, and then a lot of Jim Rader, for whom I have the greatest respect. And I had the fortune of having a great conversation with him because he was there representing the board for registration of voters, I guess as a volunteer at the polls this past March or past November. Actually, I think it was this past November. But I've seen a huge demographic shift in the North End and I haven't done it consistently because I did, step down for a little bit, and then I did live in Winooski for a little bit. So it's been on and off for 44 years, but I've seen a huge demographic shift in the city of Burlington and in the North End especially, and a great one. We now see people of different languages coming through, different modes of dress, all different political stripes, and it's really, really rewarding to see.
That's great.
My old neighborhood come alive. From 1981 to 2025, and we see a very different ward now, and it's nice to see people come through the polls and bring the kids that they carried as babies now as young adult voters themselves. So it's nice to see the generational shift, and it's nice to see the city changing demographically, and our ward probably a little slower than the rest of the city changing, but I think we're really moving in a great direction, and to try to make the polls an affirming place for those who are new to vote and are new in their citizenship is highly rewarding. And I look forward to every election for that.
That's great. So, any awards that you've won over the years? I know you're a very humble person.
Not that come to mind, but I think the reward is probably when I'm sitting at a restaurant and I don't necessarily recognize the wait staff, and then they say, "Are you Mr. Fleury?" And it's like, who wants to know? Or yes, yeah. I say, yes, I am. And they say, oh, I had you in 3rd grade, or I had you in 5th grade, and I didn't recognize them because they're now in their 20s or 30s or 40s, and they change from the time they're 8 or 10, you know?
Right.
And so I said, oh, I really enjoyed it being in your class. And it's like, that feels like the greatest reward, that I could possibly have. And so I just always learned, always tip well when you're in a restaurant, because the wait staff you have may have been a former student. So may they speak well of you when you leave.
Right.
That's right.
That's great. Is there anything else in your life you'd like to talk about or touch on?
I think just continuing to find ways to serve. I remember growing up in the mid to late 60s, and I was probably in the 3rd or 4th grade when Martin Luther King was assassinated, and how deeply saddening a time that was. And I always looked at him as a good, guidepost or role model and stuff. And then a few years later, I remember Shirley Chisholm running for president. And I had the honor of meeting her having her autograph the book that she wrote, and being the first woman of color to run for the presidency. I thought she was a really, really inspiring individual, and warm and kind when I met her in person. And so she was a good role model to continue that, to kick in doors that need to be kicked in. And she did it with such grace and class. And so those were inspiring people for me. And then a few years later on, Jimmy Carter was the first president I was able to vote for as a young voter myself. And I just thought the way that he embedded, support for people of all backgrounds and all colors, and, his support for peace and human rights in his work. So I guess if I learned anything as a lesson overall, just embed those values in whatever it is that you do, whether you're teaching or at a food pantry, or whether it's a big work or a small work. I think a lot of the small work needs to get done as much as the big work, and that's how you do it. And as you work at your own local level, and then you realize that there's a cause beyond ourselves out there that we also need to contribute to on a big level. So just to embed your values in whatever you see, and keep your head held high and keep moving forward.
March on. Any quote that you have that really resonates for you that you want to share?
I think one that I read from somebody, and I can't even remember the source, but they said, just wake up every day and comfort and affirm whoever it is that you meet. And I thought, like, wow, instead of some long phrase, like, that just really boils it down, and so I strive to do that each day. And I have my moments when I'm not able to do that, or because of my own imperfection, not willing to do that or something, but I just hold that up as my personal value. If I see somebody, just try to comfort and affirm them, and make them feel safe and supported as best you can. And we'll fall sometime, but just get back up again and keep doing it.
Well, I have to say, you are an amazing public servant, and it's been an honor having you at the show, and thank you for all you've done.
Thank you. I just feel that there's important things that we need to do at the national level and international level, but I've just been so grateful to be a member of the Burlington community, that it's kind of just giving back what Burlington has given to me in so many ways, that it's kind of, Burlington is my community, but it's also kind of my family. So I feel honored to be able to give back to that community that has supported me so very, very much too.
Well, we're better for having you be a part of it, Tom.
Well,
thank you so
much. I feel
much.
better for being part of this community too, and for people like you who, kind of are the glue that bring people and connect people together. So thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. Okay.